Welcome to Module 1, Chapter 3. And in this last, somewhat brief section here, we're going to explore the environment in which we plan. So not only do we have to know our business, but we need to know the environment in which it focuses as well. So we'll briefly review some things. This will augment your book and help you think of some things that you might want to consider in your own plan. As always, we start with the learning objectives to see what it is we're trying to accomplish in this unit. We are being focused. So environmental scanning involves looking at your organization's target market and assessing trends in each of the 5 environmental forces, and you will do this as part of your plan. This, in part, drives what will be your marketing mix. And here are these 5 forces: economic, technological, social, competitive, and regulatory. And these are important because we have to continually scan these. We have to look at how these are impacting things over the years. And this will help us to know what needs to be done down the line. It's a challenge. You know, who can predict the future? Are there people that can predict the future? I think we've had some recent elections where there were people who thought they could predict how voters would behave. These were scientists, these used the best tools, and they were wrong, okay? So it's not easy to predict the future. And, but to be a good planner, you've got to use the tools at hand, use the data at hand, use the science at hand, and then do the best that you can. So let's look at economic forces. Inflation can definitely have an impact on, but kind of broader than just inflation. Consumer income is a big part of this. It is one of my personal philosophies that if you have a job, that can overcome a lot of problems in your life. So having full employment like we do now helps, because it hasn't always been easy. So as I'd mentioned in an earlier lecture, in 2008, when so many people lost their jobs, this had a tremendous impact. You lose your job, you lose your insurance. Sure, you can elect COBRA, sure. Now you can go on the Affordable Care Act, but if you don't have an income, though it's still expensive to buy insurance, if a lot of people forego insurance and go uninsured, they're not going to do elective procedures. And a knee replacement or a hip replacement are 2 perfect examples. A cataract surgery. I mean, there are a lot of things that provide great benefit to quality of life, but it's not like they're going to kill you. Okay? So consumer income, how much they have, how much disposable income they have. So taxes has a impact on that too. And what we call discretionary income. So we need to know what's going on with the economy. Now, one of the things that's true, because I personally lived through this, the 2008 crash, as I will call it, a lot of people did not predict that. And though I will also add, I have evidence. There are people that did know about it. I just didn't happen to be one of them. But the problem was that when that was happening in the late summer of that year and early fall, and if you had done your strategic plan the year before, because usually those are done, finished plans are, and the plans are being submitted to boards for the next year at that point. But that would be an example of how you really would have to adjust everything financially about your organization because of that. All right, so economic forces are going to play a really big impact on this. So technology does too. Speaking of branding, one branding technique a lot of people use is high tech, high touch. I mentioned the stem cell method for repairing knees beyond a knee replacement. So that's an example of how technology can really change the industry. And we saw, I was involved with, we were getting the first MRI for our hospital. And so we were forecasting how many MRIs we were going to do. And the company that sold us the MRI helped us with that forecast. And so all the administrators were real pleased with what these numbers looked like. But, you know, I gave it a second thought. And I'm like, if we're doing more MRIs, I'll bet we'll be doing fewer CT scans. And so we need to factor that in, that MRI is going to cannibalize some of our CT, and that needs to be part of our financial analysis. Sometimes saying those kinds of things are not real popular things because everybody just wants to buy. But that is part of the honesty of just how technology can really change the industry. I put this picture in here. This was a paper that I published about nanotechnology, otherwise called smart dust. And you can see that is a blood vessel, and it's got this little bot in there. And think of how that would change things, that instead of doing the Roto-Rooter of cardiac catheterization, using wires and stents up through your vessels, that we send a little robot in to just clean up some of that gunk that's in there. Think of how that might have an impact on statins like Lipitor. So we continue to evolve, and the technology can replace. Now, with that, there's a lot of regulation involved in technology. And any of you that have been involved with someone that has cancer understand this. There are drugs out there, and say Keytruda would be an example. You've perhaps seen a television commercial about it. And so Keytruda is approved and has had clinical trials for lung cancer, but they want to try Keytruda for other cancers as well, but it's not approved. It hasn't been through clinical trials. And so your insurance company will say, no, we're not going to approve Keytruda for this other cancer. And I actually know someone that went through this, and but that was their last hope, was to try Keytruda. And so the Keytruda, they would have gotten 6 infusions of the Keytruda, and the first one was $26,500. Now, the company, which in this case was Merck, I believe, ended up giving that person the Keytruda for free because it was not approved yet by the insurance company, and they wanted somebody with a different kind of cancer to get the Keytruda. Okay, so the point is, all of this, there's a lot of interweaving and interconnection. There are new things going on. People who are desperate want to try new things, but we need evidence-based medicine as a foundation for moving forward with that. So another major factor looking at that will discuss and have discussed and will continue to discuss is the aging of America. And so that's going to affect healthcare. They are the largest consumers. Obviously, this is creeping up. From last I heard, there are now more older people in America than younger people. Many of, if we're in marketing and we're trying to focus on what we should do, the needs of that population will certainly play a large part in that. So there's all kinds of social factors, demographic factors. The Affordable Care Act made a huge difference in care, people getting care that had been putting off care or couldn't afford care. And indeed, the health spending went up on in the United States because more people had insurance to pay for these services. So that plays a major factor. Certainly the opioid crisis is a huge factor that is affecting the population and healthcare as well. I was at a seminar, they were saying something like 11% of the patients coming through the emergency room were mental health issues, many of which were drug abuse issues and overdoses, and there weren't places to put the patients after they were seen in the emergency room. This is having such a huge impact. For the last 2 years in a row, the average lifespan in the United States declined for the first time forever because so many people are dying from this. All right, so I'm not seeing really good solutions out there. People are at least aware of the problem. They're thinking about it. But that has a major impact as well, because if you're marketing or you're running the emergency room, okay, that's this huge shift in a health problem is having a big impact on your shop. All right, so marriage rates, pregnancies, deliveries, we're having changes in, people shifting parts of the country, people becoming suburban, and certainly different racial and ethnic changes as well. Definitely greater proportion of the population has been what has historically been considered minority groups. And is there a change in attitudes? And I'm going to say yes. My mother recently died this last year. Her whole attitude about healthcare is totally different than my attitude and my siblings' attitude. She's old school. You sit in front of a doctor, he tells you what to do, you do it. You don't ask questions, you don't ask alternatives. Baby boomers are not like that. They're going to Dr. Google, they're looking at alternatives, they're asking questions, they're coming in with research studies, they're much more involved with their care. And I would say they want to just continue being young and having their active lifestyle. And so I think there are a lot of changes coming about as well. They want to stay active. I hear a lot of baby boomers saying they have no interest in having the long years of decline and inactivity and pain that previous generations have had. What they intend to do about it, I'm not really clear, but that's something out there. And if you're someone who is trying to forecast what's going to be going on 5 or 10 years down the road, that factor, I hear my peers saying this a lot. And it's something to ask a lot of questions about. It's certainly the roles of men and women have really changed. Female physicians, that is no small thing either. And, historically, I'll just give you a quick story of, we had a cardiac surgeon and she was just awesome. She had these small hands, but she was so dexterous and she would just do these great cardiac caths. And we did not have a female physician changing room in surgery. The physicians had to change with the nurses, and that bugged her. And she's like, I am not a nurse, and I don't want to be in the nurse's locker room. I want to be in a physician locker room. And so my hospital kept saying, okay, we understand. We're going to find a space. We're going to do something about it. And then kept not doing anything about it. And so she left. A competitor picked her off over a locker room. Okay, this is where we are in the world. We lost $6 million in revenue because she left. Okay, so once again, um, when you're the person that's planning things and out there making decisions, know people, know what they want, and pay attention to it, or at your peril. All right. So that's just an example of some things that are out there. Certainly cultural competency and patience is important too, and we see a little bit more being paid attention to that. Regulation is the last category, so you're going to look at whatever it is that you're trying to market and what's going to affect this. We see competition, and you're like, regulation, competition, what are you talking about? I'm talking about Atrium. So go read that story, because UNC System and Carolinas CMC wanted to merge. And there is a prohibition against people or companies getting too large and having too large of a market share. And they were getting signals, because Novant surely was not liking this. So they were getting signals that are like, no, you're going to be too big. That violates the monopoly regulations in this country. And they backed off. Okay. So these are examples. And if you're the competitor, and I have no inside knowledge of what Novant did, but I'm sure they were preparing reports and giving them to people. All right, so there are a lot of regulatory factors. You may have these wonderful ideas and someone says not so fast. So pricing, this will also be another evolving area of whether we will have more fixed pricing like Japan that we looked at and Sick Around the World. Who you can refer to, can you refer to yourself? There are prohibitions against that. Promotion. We are one of the only countries in the world that can advertise prescription medication. We used to not be able to do that. Okay, look at who is advertising on television. So you don't have this kind of direct-to-consumer advertising in other countries of the world. That could change. And then certainly the privacy laws with HIPAA as well. And any of you that are in operations are well familiar with the work that you have to do to comply with HIPAA. All right, so those are our factors here in this section. So hopefully you've kind of gotten some ideas of what you can be doing in your project and how to complete these exercises.